Well, hi, Year 10 Business Studies students. This is another PowerPoint presentation on the human resource topic. And in this presentation, we're going to continue with recruitment and selection of employees. We're going to look at the importance of effective recruitment. And we're also going to continue and have a quick look at contracts of employment. So just to give you a bit of a navigation, we're going to do the areas highlighted in yellow here. So what are the main benefits to the business of having effective recruitment and selection processes? What are the different types of employment, and what contracts of employment can exist? Just a reminder then, the recruitment and selection process, we went through this in the last PowerPoint, but this is the process through which businesses go to recruit and select employees. First of all, once a job advert has been placed, the company has to match application forms to the person's specification, draw up a short list of candidates for interview, invite those applicants to attend the interview process. Now, the interview process, you'll recall, the selection process could have interviews, psychometric testing, and assessment centres, and then the best applicant is chosen on the basis of their performance in the selection process, and then all candidates are told of the decision of the organisation whether or not they've got the job. Why is it important to get the recruitment and selection process right? So we've got to really think about the benefits of an effective recruitment and selection process. Here's some of the key points which you'll read about in your reading. But first of all, high levels of productivity. If you've got the right people doing the right jobs, you've selected the right candidates, then those people are very productive. They produce a lot of output for you as an organisation. Equally, if you have people who can produce the right quality product, that's very important. So getting the right people with the right skills to produce high quality is extremely important for the firm. High qualities of customer service. Imagine you're running a hotel. You need people who are hardworking, polite, who are friendly, who can interact very, very well with people staying in a hotel. So it's very important to get the right people to work for your hotel. And also, actually, I would add one. This isn't in the textbook, actually, but getting the right people is very important for creativity. Really good people can be really, really creative. And they're the people who can develop your new products and solve problems for you in the long term. Good little diagram, this one. This one's in your textbook. So effective recruitment and selection increases productivity, improves quality and service. It improves rates of employee retention, which I'll talk about in a moment. And the consequence of that is reduced cost of production and more customer satisfaction. And of course, all of that combines to increase profits. And so a good recruitment and selection process is very, very important for the profits of an organisation. We're going to talk a little bit now about employee retention. Businesses want to keep or retain their good employees. And here we can measure this in a business. So we measure it by using two measures, actually, retention rate and staff turnover. Retention rate is the number of employees a business keeps as a percentage of the total workforce. And staff turnover is the percentage of employees that leave a business, usually measured in any particular year. So we need to understand how we measure retention rate and staff turnover. There's a little bit of maths involved here. Let's say, for example, a business employs usually around 1,500 people, and on average, around 150 people leave the business each year. Then the business retains 1,350 people. And we can express this as a percentage. The number of employees retained times 100 and then divided by the total number of employees, and you can see the equation I've written there for you. 1,350 times 100 divided by 1,500 equals 90%. And so what we can say is this business has a retention rate of 90%. It retains 90% of its employees in any given year. Another way to look at this is the staff turnover. The staff turnover is the opposite to the retention rate. Okay, so in this particular case, if 90% of the employees are being retained, it's therefore logical that 10% of the employees have left. And so 10% is the staff turnover for this organisation. Here's a few little exercises you can do yourselves. So please can you read the two examples I've given here and calculate the retention rate for these two different questions. And once you've done that, a little extension, just calculate the staff turnover percentage. You can email me these answers at the end of the week. Now, it's really important, as I've said, that businesses retain their good employees. There are some real problems associated with a low retention rate. If a business can't keep hold of good employees, then it's going to have problems. First of all, when an employee leaves, a business has got to replace them, and that means going through the recruitment and selection process. Now, the recruitment and selection process is very time-consuming. It's not free of charge for a business to do this. It costs quite a lot of money. And so advertising jobs, for example, and having staff involved in interviews when they perhaps could be doing something else is costly for the business. Equally, it can result in a reduction of quality. New employees may not have the skills of the employees that have left, or new employees may require training. New employees may require to understand the processes and procedures of the business, which will take them a little while to learn. For at least for a period of time, therefore, there's going to be a reduction in quality and customer service as new employees come on board. So it's better to keep your existing employees if you can. And of course, all this amounts to reduced productivity. A new employee is less productive than an experienced, long-standing employee. And therefore productivity can suffer if you have a very low retention rate in the organisation. And of course, businesses train employees, and the last thing a business wants to do is spend an awful lot of time and money and effort training an employee just to have that employee leave the business. The benefits of training are lost if you have a low retention rate. And worse still, you could train employees and then they could go and work for your competitors. And so actually it's your competitors who receive all the benefit of your training that you've done. And of course, businesses want to retain knowledge and experience. Experienced employees are often very, very knowledgeable. They understand the business, they understand the procedures, they understand their job very, very well. And you want to keep these people. You don't want to lose these people. So a low retention rate is very problematic for an organisation. We're now going to turn to another area of employment law. We're going to look at contracts of employment. A contract of employment is a written document signed by both the employee and the employer, and it sets out the terms and conditions under which that employee is employed by the firm. It is a legal requirement, and by law it must be signed and agreed within 2 months of an employee starting work. It is a legally binding agreement, and it includes some very important aspects of the employment of the individual. So, for example, it would include the normal working hours. For example, my contract of employment requires me to work, I think, 38 hours a week. Actually, most teachers work a lot more than that, but a minimum of 38 hours a week. It includes the rates of pay, how much the employee is going to be paid. It includes the holiday entitlement. So, for example, most employees would get, say, 20 or 25 days of holiday per annum, plus, of course, public holidays, bank holidays. It includes the duties at work. What the employee actually has to do is laid out in some detail in the employment contract. And it includes the place of work, where the employee carries out their role. Employment contracts can include other things as well, but these are the typical things that are included in almost all employment contracts. Now, some employment contracts are full-time and some employment contracts are part-time, and I'll say a little bit more about those things in a moment. Equally, an employment contract could include job sharing, or it could be a 0 hours contract, which are becoming more common in employment in the UK. So we'll talk a little bit about those two in a moment. So, full or part-time employment. Okay, now some employees are employed full-time and some employees are employed part-time. There is no legal definition as to what full-time and part-time is, or the number of hours that have to be worked for an employee to be counted as full-time or part-time. But typically, a full-time employee is working 35 to 40 hours per week. It would state in their employment contract that they're required to work 35 to 40 hours a week or more, and that is typically regarded as full-time. Anything less than 35 hours is typically regarded as part-time, but different companies have different views on this. Now, here's a little bit of a thought process for you. Suggest the potential benefits to both employees and employers of each of full-time and part-time employment. What are the benefits to employees and employers of full-time or part-time employment? Have a little think. Stop the PowerPoint now and jot down a few ideas. Okay, here's a summary table, which I'm not going to read through. These are important things, however, so you need to go through the summary table for yourself and compare your answers to the ones that you see on the table here. This is also repeated in your textbook resource, and so you can access this and have a good read. But make sure you understand the benefits to employers and the benefits to employees of full-time and part-time contracts. Just a little more on some other types of contracts that are very commonly found these days. One is job sharing. Often two employees who want to work part-time will share a job. Happens a lot in teaching, actually. A local primary school near where we live here, it's not uncommon for one teacher to work Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday morning, and another teacher to take over the job Wednesday afternoon, Thursday and Friday. So these two employees share the job. It's effectively one job being done, but being done by two people, and they agree how they're going to split the working time up and who's going to do what. But both of those individuals want to work part-time instead of full-time, so they participate in a job share. The other type of employment contract which is becoming very common is 0 hours contracts. This is where an employee has a contract of employment, but there are no guaranteed hours of work at all. The employer gets to choose when the individual works, and it may be that the individual gets no contracted hour, gets no hours of work at all. And so an employee might actually have a week where they do no work at all because the employer doesn't ask them to do so. Now that's actually becoming fairly common these days, and particularly in perhaps lower levels of work, such as shop work. However, there is some controversy over it, and some unions particularly don't agree that 0 hours contracts should be permitted. Obviously, it's quite flexible for the employer to have 0 hours contracts, to have a pool of employees that it can call upon as and when is needed, and when those people are not needed, the company doesn't have to pay them. And of course, then it's much lower cost for the company, for the employer to employ those individuals. Okay, so just a couple of tasks for you then. Reading task first of all, have a little read of the bottom of page 182 in your textbook up to page 186 and take notes. And don't forget, when you're taking notes, you're creating a revision resource for yourself for when you come to your exams next summer. So take good notes if you can. Use spider diagrams, mind maps, whatever you prefer, but make sure you create those revision resources. And finally, have a read of your textbook. There's a very good case study on page 188. Please have a read of the Swaledale Hotel Group Limited case study and try to complete the questions 1 to 4, and please could you hand those in by Friday. And if you like, by all means create your tweet.